All right, we are live. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming out for our Ignition event. It's a huge pleasure to be able to welcome you here. I'm Peter Zemsky. For those who don't know me, I'm a strategy professor at INSEAD and the deputy dean. Huge passion for innovation, entrepreneurship, tech. It's been a great project. I was just reflecting, it was 4 months ago that I fired off an email to Station F and Cedric and saying, hey, down in the Fontainebleau forest, we're starting to hear that maybe something's happening in Paris. I mean, news travels maybe a little bit slowly. And so September 17th, could we get together and talk about a possible partnership? And Cedric came back, and for those who know INSEAD, you won't be surprised. He says, I don't know what's going on, but you're like the 12th person from INSEAD to sort of entrepreneurially reach out and ask for a conversation. And because as you know, our community tends to be very much self-starters, people just doing stuff. I said, well, no, I think I could mobilize and actually have a conversation and get something done. And so 4 months later, here we are. And I think things moved fast for a variety of reasons. Obviously, there's something happening in Paris, and we'd really made a decision as a leadership team of the school that we wanted to get closer, get more involved. Obviously, once you see the facilities here, it's super impressive. But I think the other thing that just made us really comfortable about accelerating a partnership with Station F was really the sense in which the group here is very mission-driven and values-driven in ways that we found resonated with INSEAD in a lot of ways. So obviously, INSEAD founded post-war Europe, bringing people together and saying, hey, let's pursue business as a way to develop peace and prosperity. And when we looked at Station F, I mean, it's obviously there's a lot about building up the French ecosystem, but it's also about welcoming startups from across Europe, across the world, and that appealed. And the other thing is, you know, I think for me, the core of INSEAD values are really around diversity. And again, Station F here has a real commitment to opening up and giving access to the startup world, both obviously with respect to gender, but also socioeconomics, which is increasingly critical. And so we just felt really comfortable accelerating here. And of course, the other thing I think that we found really welcoming is just the commitment to big, bold innovation, right? No one else has had the ambition to do something as big as this, right? With all of the interest in startups and incubators and building ecosystems, this place is still really unique. And again, for INSEAD, we like to think of ourselves as also having a lot of ambition, a lot of uniqueness. First international business school, first one-year MBA program. We pioneered a lot of elements of executive education, all the move to be multi-continent. So we've done all of these things. And the great thing, I think, for INSEAD and Station F is we're just down the train line, right? So we're in a train station here. You walk over to Gare de Lyon, and you take the train down to Fontainebleau, and you've got hundreds and hundreds of top MBAs studying right by the Chateau of Fontainebleau. And really, when we think about what we want to bring here, it's really this aspiration to make, you know, not only French tech stronger, but really a leading global spot. Really that this can be a launch pad for a whole new wave of French-based and European-based global tech companies. So if you look at our MBA students, you can see this is the students who just arrived. We have students arrive twice a year. 500 students, and these are their nationalities, over 70 nationalities. And again, if you look at the top 5 countries represented, you know, okay, Spain, this promotion is the one European country, US, India, Brazil, China. It just brings a level of international resources. And again, for those who are just getting to know INSEAD, what you'll discover, it's not just that we're a diverse community individually, overall, but each individual is incredibly diverse. Usually when people get into our programs, it's because they've already shown an ability to work cross-culturally, working in different countries. A lot of times we have a lot of trouble actually classifying our students into one particular country. And so that's part of what makes us really special. So we're hugely excited to be here, and I'm going to turn over in a second to a bunch of other speakers to elaborate. For those who don't know Station F, you should know this is not the INSEAD LaunchPad. I've heard some people ask, is this your space? No, this is not our space. The way Station F works is this whole first zone that you're in is a whole share area, which is really around the support. It's around event space like this, but also for the VCs and the government agencies. All the 3,000 desks are down that way in a secured environment where we have a group, and you'll be hearing about that. So anyway, super excited to be here. Really grateful for all of you to show up and share the moment with us. And now I'd like to turn over the stage to our host, Roxanne Varza, the director of Station F. Big round of applause, please.
Super. Thanks, Peter. Everybody, welcome. Wow. I heard that there are some people in the room today that had never been to Station F before. Who's first time? Wow, awesome. We are really thrilled to have you here. And I was also told there are some crazy startups in the room that are taking part in the INSEAD program. Welcome, you guys. We're really thrilled to have you here. So you are going to have a great time in Station F. I'm going to quickly run down for those of you who actually, I think Peter did a great intro on what the space is, but for those of you that aren't as familiar with our startup campus and what we do and how we're organized, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we're doing here and also a little bit about our mission, because it's not just about being a big space and filling it up. That's kind of easy said, easy done, and doesn't really get us very far in life. So Station F is the world's biggest startup campus, but we're really about making entrepreneurship accessible. And so we wanted to bring all the resources possible on site. We have an entire ecosystem on campus. We mentioned, I think Peter said it very well, we have cut the building into 3 zones. This space that we're in is the share zone, but actually has a number of event spaces. You're in one of them. We have a massive auditorium for 360 people. We have small meeting rooms that are, you can sit on the floor and brainstorm, or you can sit around a table and do a board meeting, whatever you want to do. We have a couple of different spaces for workshops, one that's really quite funky and has like disguises and crayons and Legos on the wall, and one that's much more formal if you want to do workshops. So we really wanted to have a variety of different spaces for you guys to work in, host events in, and that kind of thing. We have about 30 VCs to date that actually come on campus. They function more as a membership, and there's a VC zone here. So those are 30 international funds that come regularly to meet with our startups. A couple of them have permanent offices. We have public services on campus. I know it doesn't sound very sexy, but actually it is. We have 30 different public service organizations, everything from visas to tax to data protection, IP, you name it. They are on campus. They're not in this space. They're sitting 2 floors above you. And we actually have one site, so it's like a one-stop shop for whatever your public service questions, needs are. So we're trying to really get the government to work with us on simplifying that as much as we can. So that's all happening in this zone, and right across the hall, you have a tech lab or a maker space with tons of prototyping devices. So for any of you making hardware, somebody just showed me a really cool device that does kind of like flashcards. There you are in the back. Very cool startup. So that kind of thing, if you guys need prototyping devices, you have it all on site. We also have a coffee shop open to the public, so anybody that actually wants to come and meet with you, doesn't have a space here, they're not in one of the programs, there's a coffee shop, you just pay €5 an hour, you come here, you work. That's how it works. For all of you that are taking part in the program, you're going to be in the startup zone. We only let select startups into that zone, so it's not really open to people who are coming to be like, what is a startup and how does it work? It's really for people here that are driving to get their business done and actually making things happen. The INSEAD program, awesome program. All the values that Peter said, I think we're right on point with all the different nationalities. We had about 50 different countries applying also to Station F programs. And we have, diversity is really something that we're striving for. So I think we're right on par with you guys there. But you guys have some great neighbors in that area too. We have programs that are run by big companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Ubisoft, Thales. We're covering a variety of different topics: fashion tech, fintech, med tech. We have a couple of other schools in there, business schools and engineering schools. So I think really you guys are going to have a great time, really be kind of like well placed in there. And finally, the last part of the building that's going to be coming up later this year is a massive restaurant that'll be open to the public. We'll seat 1,000 people, have 4 kitchens and a bar. open 24/7. I'm told this is very exceptional for Paris. I want to wait and actually see it happen. But we'll be doing that later this year. So really anybody who wants to come and be at Station F can do so. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what we're doing here. We're striving to build great startups. They can come from anywhere around the world. They can be from any background. But I think when we look at INSEAD's quote-unquote portfolio, we have people building companies like BlaBlaCar and TransferWise and working at top funds like EQT. So I think we have a pretty good match here. So I'm told that some of those people are here today, so I will be handing over the microphone to them. Thank you all for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much. That's good. We look forward to the partnership with you and your team, Roxanne. Next up, we have Thomas Bittner, who, despite the name and the passport from Germany, is, in true INSEAD fashion, the president of our French Alumni Association. And for those who are shocked about that, you should know that actually our two biggest alumni associations are France and the UK. Thomas leads the French Association, but we did have a recent election, and we now have a Frenchman leading the UK Association. So that's good. I think maybe they were making a statement about Brexit. We don't know. Anyway, Thomas, come on down, please.
Peter, you have the slide for the slides? Yes, so you have, Peter talked about the 1,000 MBAs every year. Once you have your diploma, you are an alumnus, an alumnus. And our mission is really to inspire, grow, and connect. Inspiring the alumni, growing the value which we deliver to them, and connecting them internally and also to the rest of the world. We are very open to the rest of the world, to the other MBAs, to the other schools, to obviously the corporations and the ecosystem. One of the big advantages of INSEAD is that when you are in an association of alumni, you are part of the 55,000 alumni in the world, which are in 170 countries and 159. So it's basically United Nations. You know, it is just amazing, and we are 6,350 alumni in France. So that's really a resource for all the startups and essential. You probably know the latest PitchBook rankings. We have raised, INSEAD alums have raised $8 billion, or euros in this case, in the last years. And this is the highest ranking in Europe, and it would get us to the top 5 MBAs in the States also. You know some of those, unicorns, Citymapper not yet, but this is already the result of the entrepreneurship spirit of the alumni. And we have an amazing strong DNA in the Alumni Association in France. We have a club, a center of excellence, which follows the entrepreneurship from Business Lab, where the alumni help entrepreneurs to build their business model, to a pitch club, where they pitch already in front of people who want to invest. We have business angels who are, in fact, investing into startups. We then have a hacking growth. If you want to become a unicorn, and once one or a couple of first years have been okay, what do you do? We then have an owner club where in fact people who run these startups can talk to each other. This is then a closed club. It's like the second hall there. So this is really what you get when you are an alumni, and when you are a startup, you really should piggyback on that and get all of the value out of those 6,500 or 55,000 in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. That's great. Actually, I should say it was me who snuck Citymapper onto the side with the other unicorns, partly because Asaf is a former student of mine. and partly because here's a guy who's out there in the mapping space competing with both Apple and Google, and I feel like he needs every nudge he can get. So he's doing a pretty reasonable job, so there you go. All right, next up is Nancy, and Nancy runs our Entrepreneurship Center at INSEAD. Really, she has the role of trying to take all those unruly entrepreneurial alumni all over the world and channel them and bring them usually to service of the MBAs, but now more generally. Nancy, why don't you tell us about some of the resources?
Super. So, clicker also. Hi, everyone. So, grab the clicker. So I'm so excited to be here because this has been a work in progress for us, and it's fantastic to see it coming together. So I'm here to talk specifically about the resources that we will be bringing to the Station F community. So one thing that we really want to make clear is we're not here just for our INSEAD entrepreneurs, but we're really here for all of the residents who call Station F home. So earlier I saw the hands of the folks that were INSEAD residents. Who do we have here that are from Station F? Or startups from Station F? Yeah, great. So when we were thinking about the partnership here, we were trying to figure out what more can we add to this already very dynamic ecosystem. And ultimately the answer came down to our strength is our people, our students, our alumni, our faculty. They all have this special something about them, the passion, the intellect, the knowledge, the expertise, the diversity that they have. This is what we want to share with the ecosystem here. So we've come up with a few different things few different ways that we'll be able to contribute. So access to MBA talent, community events featuring our alumni and faculty, and then mentorship. So everybody knows that to have a successful organization or a successful startup, you have to have the right people on your team. And we have those folks for you. As you've already heard, I think it's pretty clear, our MBA students are top, are cream of the crop. They're diverse. They have extraordinary expertise in a number of different fields, and they're so multicultural that they'll be able to help you with your startups and help you grow beyond borders. So a typical MBA student will speak 3, 4, 5 languages and have worked in multiple countries. So our students are ready and motivated to work with their startups. And there are a few ways for you to be involved with them. Internships. So in the summer, if you're looking for an intern, our students are available from July to August. If you may have special challenges throughout the year, they are also available to work on projects. And then if you're looking to grow your team, they're available to be leaders, key contributors to help you solve problems, build your businesses from the ground up, or to help you expand to the next country and possibly, really actively contribute to the next unicorn. The other way is if you have now the right team, what else do you need? So you need some knowledge. So later you'll hear a little bit about our sneak preview of our Global Entrepreneur Speaker Series that we'll be bringing. In addition, we'll have faculty workshops and master classes. So we have 16 associated faculty who will be at Station F from time to time to run workshops and to bring new ideas, innovative ways of thinking, provide frameworks, and help you structure your ideas. And so this is a very unique way for you to engage with the INSEAD faculty on a very close basis and get some intellectual and practical advantages to help you, grow your businesses. And then, of course, for our residents of the INSEAD LaunchPad, we have such a wide group of mentors and advisors ready for you. We know the power of having the right people to be helping you, guiding you along the process. So a little plug for the INSEAD Center for Entrepreneurship that I run. We have an established network of 110 entrepreneurs and residents who have expertise in a wide range of fields that are available to help. And of course, as you heard from Thomas earlier, we have a very strong network in Paris of locally based advisors, and then of course globally as well too. So a little shout out to the alumni who want to participate. We'll have more information later for you on how you too can be a mentor, advisor, or subject matter experts to help our startups. So with that, we're very excited to be here. You know, for the residents, you know where we sit. Stop by any time to visit us, and then you'll be hearing more information about our programs.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, so this is our last mini speaker, and particularly before the panel. Particularly important, though, for those who are interested in applying to get into this Station F ecosystem to become part of the INSEAD LaunchPad. So Valerie is one of a group of senior alumni we pulled together to advise us on this, familiar with Station F from her work at AWS. Valerie, over to you.
Hi everyone, happy to see you there for the ignition of the INSEAD LaunchPad at Station F. This is great. And I also would like to say hi to the people who are remote, who are attending the Facebook Live event. So hi guys. So actually from my other cap, the one which keeps my days busy, which is to run a strategy for France for AWS, I'm already working with Station F, and that's what I want to share with you today. Actually, Station F is a great place to be for INSEAD alums who want to run and scale their ventures. So, two main reasons for that. First, learn and grow. As Roxanne was mentioning, there's a great ecosystem of two things, well, maybe more than two things. Of startups first, because the startups who are staying here at Station F have been selected, and the selection is not easy, so you're surrounded by great, bright people. And also the partners. Roxanne was mentioning Facebook and other guys. Actually, AWS is just above there, and I can tell you from the mentor's office that we have here, and I've done a few office hours there, that one, the startup I've seen who are staying here at Station F and looking for advice are really great, and second, the advice we give are really great as well. So, so please come by, and I'm speaking on behalf of AWS, obviously, but I'm sure the other partners provide with almost as good advice as ours. Second, scale globally. I think Sheryl Sandberg was there in June for the launch of Station F, and this is Andy Jassy, the CEO of AWS. He was not there, but I can tell you that he personally has a lot of interest in Station F. We are just there, and he wants to grow what we are doing here with the startups here. And speaking actually, those are actually two examples of the global attention that the startups in Station F are driving. You are here, you are part of a place that everybody globally is looking at. So, speaking for INSEAD LaunchPad, sorry, I don't know where to be. Actually, INSEAD is also supported by a group of a STIRCO of experienced alumni. I think we're all here, so if you want to say hi, guys, because everybody around, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So there's Renan here, and Nicolas Cherdakov here, and Guillaume Lotte-Demey there, and myself. We all have a lot of experience with startups, having launched some and scaled some, or supporting some by different ways. So please come, and we are, I mean, this is the ignition of INSEAD LaunchPad. So we are all here in this room, part of something which is just starting. We are building it. The story, it's day one. Sorry, this is an Amazon way of saying things, but it is day one, and we are building this story. So for the startups, for the entrepreneurs who would like to apply for the next intake, there's a few criteria, at least for eligibility. This program is for INSEAD alumni. So in your venture, you need to have at least one alumni, which is part of the founding team. And also, we want the venture to be a bit defined. Either the MVP is there or you're close to be there, but I mean, it's not like just an idea that you had yesterday night. You have to be a bit further than that. And then in terms of evaluation criteria, this relates to the values of INSEAD that Peter was mentioning before. So obviously, we will look after the venture viability, but also we will look after the impact, the business impact and the social impact of the startup of the business you want to launch. And obviously, as it's an INSEAD launchpad, we want to make sure that you need the benefits that INSEAD plus Station F are bringing to you. So, the call to action. We are January 17th. Tomorrow is the call for application for the next intake, with a deadline on February the 2nd. And a bunch of people will be reviewing those applications, so that February 23rd, the finalists will be invited to come on March the 9th for a live pitch, and to start on April the 2nd. So please get prepared. April the 2nd is the next intake, and it starts tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so that's a preview of what we're going to be doing, some of the highlights, how we're approaching it. I'd really underline what Valerie said. This is the beginning. In true INSEAD fashion, this is something we will co-create together. We'll be open to your feedback, your ideas, as we take this project forward. I imagine there could be a lot of questions, but rather than doing those here and now, as Valerie said, we'll be doing blasting out on social media and email, websites, FAQs, a whole bunch of information, and a whole bunch of ability to ask additional questions. So we're going to save that for tomorrow. And what I want to do now is take back the clicker, and say, hey, let's just get started with starting to contribute to the community and start to explore this issue of global entrepreneurship. And one of the things we mentioned is that over the course of the year, we've lined up a bunch of top alumni who've really built global businesses, going from one of our earlier ones, what I want to highlight here. Well, Kurt Crappy, from Silicon Valley. Obviously, Nicolas from France will come in, but we have speakers from New York, the UAE. If you don't know Krevin Ryan, probably one of the top entrepreneurs in New York, probably single-handedly has raised over $700 million of VC for his businesses, and former CEO of DoubleClick. So we have a whole bunch of stuff going, and we wanted to get the conversation started today. And so really explore this issue of global scaling, which is really important. And again, if you think about what Europe is up against, right? So Europe has got a lot of great entrepreneurs, a lot of talent, but again, the size of the markets are just not the same as China and the US. And if you're not sophisticated about how you think about scaling, it's going to be much more challenging. Or at least that's the thesis. Let's bring the experts up. Taavet, Jo, and Fred, why don't we grab stools and have a conversation. Please join me in welcoming the panelists. And anyone who's sitting on a microphone, now's the time to cough it up. All right, here we go. All right. So, well, why don't I got Fred next to me, so maybe we'll start here in France and then move over the channel to the UK. So Fred, again, I remember Fred as a student of mine, and he was the strange student in 2007 who would come up after class and say, oh, that was really interesting, professor. How does it apply to ride sharing? And at the time we would all think, what is this guy talking about? And now we know. So so for those maybe who don't know, who might be listening in from afar, Fred, why don't you tell us a little bit, obviously, about what BlaBlaCar does, but in particular, just lay out the sort of global footprint that you've built now.
Hello, everybody. So where we are today, so yeah, maybe it's easier to start where we are today. So it's a community for carpooling, which is sharing your car, and on travels when you have seats available with other passengers. And so it's a community of 60 million people. We're in 22 countries. It's a company which is based in Paris, but we have offices on 3 continents. Yeah, it's a team of a bit more than 250 people. It's been a long ride. You know, often people say it was an overnight success, to which I reply, yes, but it was a long night. So yeah, in the beginning, it was really an idea. I had started the company right before joining INSEAD, and I wanted to make it a business. There were already some members registering and sharing their rights together in France on a service which was called covoiturage.fr. And I wanted to scale the business, and I wanted to learn about entrepreneurship, and that's why I joined the school, and then I made the business venture competition, which I ended up winning. I did it twice, you remember. First time I was number 4, and second time I was number 1. And then it really gave me some confidence to really launch this business, because in the end some people with business education understood it. So it meant that maybe there was something to do there, and it's been my life ever since.
What are your biggest markets now?
The biggest market is Russia. I actually just come back from Russia through a red-eye flight. It was a great pleasure to come back from Moscow this morning. And so, yeah, Russia is surprising. We launched Russia 4 years ago now, and it's been the fastest growth we've ever seen. We thought it would be great, but we did not expect it would be so great. We have more than 12 million Russians who are using BlaBlaCar today. It's even bigger activity than what we have in France. So it's become our biggest country in 4 years, even though we've been in France for a lot more than that.
Very good. Why don't we jump over to Jo? Tell us about the role. Obviously, you're at EQT Ventures now, but tell us a little bit about the role you had at Uber and some of the international expansions you were involved in.
Yeah, sure. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. So I spent until fairly recently the last 4 years working at Uber. I joined in 2013 as the GM of London. There was a team of 3 people. I think all of my former colleagues and friends thought I was crazy because no one had heard of Uber at that point, and had a fantastic journey over those 4 years. So oversaw our expansion across the UK into 40 towns and cities across the UK. I think by the time I left, there were about 50,000 drivers and 5 million users across the UK. And then oversaw the expansion into Ireland, Norway, Denmark, Finland. And sort of as we grew, I also took on the rest of the Nordics, Baltics and Benelux. So left once we had a team of over 300 people across those 10 countries, and obviously been a roller coaster ride over the last 4 years. Now I'm working as an executive in residence at EQT Ventures.
All right, so Taavet Hinrikus, who those don't know, was originally employee number 1, I guess, at Skype and head of strategy, but then went off, created his own company, TransferWise.
Thanks, Peter. And hey, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. So quickly about TransferWise. Really started TransferWise to solve my own problem. So I'm an immigrant from Estonia. I moved to London while I was working at Skype and realized that whenever I need to move money from my Estonian bank to London, I get really screwed by my bank. They take a hidden fee, they take a public fee, the money takes 4 days to arrive. It's a complete mess. So found a better way of doing it and realized there must be other people just like me and my co-founder who could benefit from this service. And we launched it about 3 weeks after I graduated from INSEAD, and 15 minutes after launching, the first guy sent us £2,000. It was a moment of, oh shit, what are we going to do now? So that's kind of the beginning of TransferWise. That was 8 years ago now. Today we're a team of 900 people where we have 2 million customers in about 45 countries.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. So why don't we just get into this topic? And I guess my first question is, am I biased? For sitting at INSEAD, I start to see more and more startups interested in global scaling earlier. I mean, maybe it's sort of post-Uber, post-Airbnb. Do you guys see that as a trend? What do you think's behind it?
maybe, yeah, I'll take it quickly, but I think it's not an option to scale globally when you're a tech company, because you need scale to produce profitability and also to feed your innovation, because you need some money to really invest into your R&D efforts and make sure you stay ahead of the competition. So it is not an option, and that's why I think the VCs like this kind of businesses, because in order to scale fast, you need to raise money, and you need to raise their money, and you know how to spend it with usually very efficient marketing strategies. But it's to me, it's been working not because one or the other wanted it, just because it is not an option for you to grow globally as a tech startup, and for this you need money, and the best money you can get is from the VCs.
Very good. Guys, thoughts on interest in global scaling?
I think we're living in a kind of a unique world right now, where globalization enables companies to go international much sooner than it was possible before. And I think what it really means is that for entrepreneurs, you have an opportunity to have a much bigger impact. And it does make perfect sense to utilize what you've built in multiple countries. So, if I look at TransferWise, it's a platform we've built, obviously we get much more scale, we get much more efficiency by utilizing it globally. And, no single bank it would never make sense for a bank to do it, because they would only be able to run it in one country. So having this global reach is a unique possibility today, and then obviously that's why it's been possible to scale companies so quickly.
I mean, what I hear from both of you is, tech is a big fixed cost, fixed investment game, and if you're going to play and win, you need a big market size. And if you sit in a mid-sized country, you're not going to have the scale to really drive the innovation and leverage your investments. Jo, did you want to jump on that?
Yeah, I mean, from EQT Ventures perspective, we're very much looking for local success stories that really want to scale and have those global ambitions. They're not just looking for a quick and early exit, but they're looking to scale globally. For me, a lot of it's also about timing. So you hear a lot of startups talking about scaling globally, but it's around finding when is the right time to do that. Because if you do it before you've figured out what your product is and sorted out the product market fit, you can end up losing focus and distracting yourselves. But equally, if you leave it too late, then you've got competitors springing up in all the different markets across Europe.
Yeah. Anyway, so I definitely want to pick up on those threads and actually start getting into what do we know about how you effectively globally scale. So why don't we take what Jo said, just around timing. Fred or Taavet, what have you learned about sort of right time for scaling and global?
As soon as possible. But as Jo was pointing out, it's really a question of making sure you get to your product market fit in one country, making sure you know kind of how it works in one, and then make sure you don't spread yourself too thin. Because it's kind of hard, you're starting up and there's a million things to do, a million things you're worried about. And the last thing is having to jump on a plane to go to Germany. It could really be a distraction if you haven't figured out how it works in one place and figure out what do you need to scale. Is it people? Like what kind of role? So I think figuring out that is kind of the first. But then I don't think you can afford to wait, because also what happens now is if you don't do it, then someone else will do it instead of you. So that's kind of the forcing function from behind, that if you don't do it, someone else will.
I know, Fred, at BlaBlaCar, you often had that on the back of your mind.
Yeah, I would say it's good to think global from day one. So like start an activity that can grow internationally, but possibly, yes, decide at the right moment, because if you do it too early, you may be too weak to actually support it. You may have processes which are not efficient enough and which cost you a lot of money. So it means you'll be spending money inefficiently, and it's never good. And yeah, so everything is timing in life, like everything. Like when you meet your wife, when you meet your co-founders, when you decide to launch a business, and when you decide to expand internationally. So you have to feel when is the right moment, when you feel that you've proven your model in one country efficiently enough that you have some kind of method that you'll be able to replicate and be more efficient in the next country, and then in the next, in the next. What I would say though is that thinking global from day one also means that that you should go to a second country pretty fast, especially for technical companies, because if you have only one country and one language, the entire team and the people will tend to think that there is only one country in the world, which then when you will want to expand will be an issue, because all your code will be made for one country, and then it is not flexible enough to handle other languages, other currencies, other anything.
I think it's a great advantage to do it in Europe, actually, because in Europe you're also going to be forced to go to a different country much sooner than in the US. You know, you look at France or UK. You know, we have great countries, but they're still pretty small in the grand scale. I'm from Estonia. Estonia is non-existent. You have no opportunity to build a business in Estonia, so you kind of need to start global right away. But even if you're in UK or France, you have to think of another country. Whereas if you're a US company, you actually have the luxury of being lazy and building a big business in the US. So I think it's an advantage we have in Europe that we're forced to do it, and that gives us an upper hand.
I mean, it's certainly part of our view at INSEAD is this is the right place to build deep expertise in Europe, and that around global expansion. If you think about prior generations of multinationals, Europe has contributed a lot. Well, in terms of building that knowledge base, anyone want to share any particular mistakes or failures that people could learn from? Things that really maybe impacted the way you approached expansion down the road?
Maybe I'll start. We've made no mistake. No, I'm just joking. So next. No, I think there is a big difference to be made between mistakes and failure. I think a failure is a repeated mistake. So, you know, there's this quote from Einstein, which I love, which is, if you try twice the same way, you'll get the same result. And the proof that you're insane is that you would try several times the same way and expect a different result. So when something doesn't work, the best solution is to try another way. You don't lose your goal, but you try somehow differently. And if you do that, at some point, after having tried 3, 5, 18 different methods, one of them will work. But it is not failure. It is a lot of mistakes along the way. And then you learn a lot. So maybe for us, and something which could be transferable, because, well, there are things which we've done. So we've tried 6 business models. People tend to forget it. And we're also trying now new business models as well. But it's been part of our culture from day one to start to explore what kind of business model could support our activity. So we've tried 6 business models. We've changed the brand as well. It was made on purpose to have kind of a French brand at the beginning, but then we have to move to BlaBlaCar to really expand internationally, which was also a pain. And then in the expansion, there are things where you never know what you should localize and what you should globalize. I mean, especially in marketing, because you want your brand to be international, but it also has to be very local in order to resonate with the local, with the region you're expanding to. And so you need to have lots of autonomy from the local teams to be able to do their own marketing, but you want them to fall into a frame which is the global brand, so that your brand doesn't fall apart because everybody is throwing the brand from all directions. So in this growth, I think we've made lots of mistakes, but which we corrected because it's always a balance between central and local and central and local. And so you push things on local, and then you realize it's too much on local, it's getting crazy. So you have to go back to global to make sure that it's kind of consistent all over all your countries. And then the countries complain because they don't have enough autonomy anymore. So you send back some autonomy there. So there's lots of mistakes, and you learn where to place the cursor.
No, I think actually one thing we can dig into a little bit is this issue of global and local in the tech space, and especially including around branding. But still, to push you guys a little bit on sort of mistakes, not failures. But I guess, Jo, I mean, you guys at Uber were under huge competitive pressures to expand fast, right? And just the nature of that opportunity was so big and so much competitive pressure. You guys moved really fast. What did you learn from all that?
I think one of the things that I learned was one of the most important things, if not the most important, is the team. And the comparison between markets, even though they all had their own challenges that were different and unique, the difference in the performance between the ones where you really find that right person who's going to build the business there, person and team, and the ones where you don't, made such a huge difference. And I think one thing I learned is, and I think this applies generally, not just when you're scaling internationally, but never settle. And so if you try to go too early before you have the right person, which is always tempting because of these pressures, that's where I've hit challenges. So figuring out really what is that right profile, who will be adaptable enough to, as Frédéric was saying, be able to iterate and try again, and when they make a mistake, try it a different way, and be able to be entrepreneurial enough to build the business in those different markets.
Taavet, any thoughts?
So for us, one of the let's say challenges has been to figure out how do we prioritize different markets. So at first we launched a business in UK and in Europe, and then you start looking at, okay, so which countries have more immigrants, where do you have the bigger money flows, and you try a very kind of macro way of prioritizing, and then you go and launch in a country, and guess what? Nothing happens. So we kind of learned that we can spend tons of time trying to prioritize. Or actually, a much better and kind of more entrepreneurial way is we just try to go and launch an MVP, same way we did in the UK, and we see from there that it starts working. Do we get product market fit? Do we have a product which is good enough for people to use and recommend? We launched in India maybe a couple of years ago. Looks like a great country. Guess what? Nothing happened because the product was shit. Now we kind of realize that we have to go to every country, make sure we crack the local regulation, maybe go through a partner at first, but get a product on the market, get people using it, and see, can we iterate from there to a great product experience which will make us happy, and then we know if we have a high enough net promoter score, we'll get the product growing in the country as well.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, this whole issue of how much do you sit and study versus how much do you actually get out. I mean, I assume you never, when you went into Russia, you probably didn't imagine it would grow so fast.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of building things. So we've been building playbooks, a playbook over the years, which is a good thing to do, of all the mistakes to avoid. And often there are things which you think are clever, and then they end up not working. And then the next people you hire will think that this thing is very clever, so they should try it. And you're like, yeah, but we've tried it already in several countries, so if you can. We can spare you that mistakes, which means that you write a playbook for people to actually have some methods of what's working, what's not working, where you can lose lots of time and energy, and what is efficient. And then also you have to learn from the country itself what are the right tools, because you can. That's a trick, because sometimes you can also be surprised that some things didn't work in one country and they work in another. And so then you have to revise your playbook.
Actually, maybe we should dig into this. So when you think about, we were talking about earlier, local versus global, where have you guys come out, so at these different companies, in terms of what are the pieces that you centralize, keep standard, and what are the activities that you end up localizing? Jo, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, and I think to Frédéric's points earlier, I think most companies go through a pendulum of that. So you start one way and then you move the other way. In Uber's experience, we started very, very decentralized. So the only things that were fully centralized was the product and tech, and some of the functions like HR and legal and things like that. And then found entrepreneurial general managers to go to the different countries and grow the business with a playbook that shows what's worked and hasn't worked before, but then got them to set that up. But then over time, as the company gets bigger, that's when you can get more synergies and efficiencies from centralizing some of those things. If every country is running the same process separately in a slightly different way, there's benefit to actually bringing some of that centrally. I think the bits that often tend to be centralized is around product and tech, making sure that it's configurable for different markets, but potentially a single owner. Public policy and communications in respect of Uber, for example, any company that's very public facing, you need to make sure that people aren't contradicting themselves. So I don't go out and say something in the UK media that's contradictory to what they're saying in the US or elsewhere. And the same for some of those other functions, brand as well. How do you make sure that even the local marketing campaigns that are tailored for the local market still look and feel like the same global brand?
Taavet, I guess you face even more regulatory issues locally. Is that right?
We call them opportunities, not issues. We are a highly regulated business. We have more than 50 regulators which are controlling us. So that's been a fun part of the journey. When it comes to local versus central, we actually have a couple different models working. So we have 8 offices now, and we run most of Europe from London. So we have a mixed team of engineers, marketing people, product managers in London who are in charge of UK, France, Germany, Spain, etc. And then we have what we call a full stack team in US, where we also have now engineers, product managers, marketing people, regulatory people who are in charge of the US market, and now Canada. And actually even Brazil is a weird one. It should be under US, but it's actually controlled from Europe. And now we're building a similar full stack team in Singapore. So we're kind of finding that we want these regional hubs which have the full stack capability and who will then be in charge of a bigger region. And inside the region, if need be, we can have some people on the ground in some countries. Like we do have people in Japan, but we don't have people in other countries in the region. But have a couple hubs which have lots of autonomy and have various skill sets so they can be really fast. Optimizing for speed has been a big part of our DNA.
Very good. Maybe come back. I asked you about failures. Anyone want to share particularly successes that might inspire people or have some lessons in them? Maybe Fred, I know because I wrote a case on BlaBlaCar a while ago, but maybe, Russia's spectacular, but also I think the German experience was pretty interesting. You want to sort of explain what you were facing in Germany?
Okay, so you mean operationally? So yeah, so initially we proved the business in one country, and then we were able to raise funds to expand internationally, and then we had been expanding in some countries, and we began to have a playbook, and then we had a very, very strong local competitor in a country we were not yet, but we knew that they were big, and that someday we would have to at least shake hands. And so they were in Germany, and so they decided to do a very, very bold move to actually go from being all free to being all pay. And they announced it, and then we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to enter, because we knew, because we had been through a monetization like this, going from free to paying model. We had been through this in France. It had taken us 14 months. We had done like a very progressive rollout, axis by axis, regions by regions, and then communicating with everybody, because it was kind of a big move. And we knew that doing a big bang move on a community of several million people would not happen easily. And so that would be a very, very shaking moment for them. So we decided to enter Germany just right at that moment with a free model. So the way we did it, since we had a playbook, we were able to staff a team. We also had hired 5 Germans ahead of planning for a German expansion. So we had 5 German people in our teams already, and we decided to launch Germany, and it took us only 12 days to deploy the service in Germany. And it was a total success, very, very, very fast. Just because all it made a lot of noise for this service, who had been there for at least 8 or 10 years, to move from free to paying model. It was on the news everywhere in Germany, and so as well as the news covering the fact that they were changing the model, the news were saying, but luckily there is a new service, which is called BlaBlaCar. And so it really helped our communication to reach through Germany as a whole, and it helped our German expansion super fast. And within 10 to 12 months, the game had totally changed in Germany, and we were able later on to buy the competitor for a much better price than what it had been to buy it earlier on.
No, it's a great example of some of those competitive dynamics. And also, because again, you're competing not only for customers, but obviously in the space, as you said, for VC funds. And again, both of these companies had raised, I think, about 10 million. And yet, after this big stumble by the German competitor, BlaBlaCar went on to do like the big 100 million round. The Germans never were able to do that and ended up having to sell. So it's a sort of great example of just how pivotal international expansion can be. Jo or Taavet, are there particular markets you were particularly proud of in terms of how you executed?
I think that one of the examples I would share is around actually judging that pendulum of centralization versus decentralization. So one market where the expansion went very well was in the UK. And it sounds fairly straightforward because it's just one country and they all speak English. But actually the regulations in the UK are incredibly fragmented. So there's actually more than 300 different jurisdictions, all of which have slightly different rules when it comes to private hire transportation. But what I think was interesting was that when we started, we had a team of 3 people that went to each city. So I was the team in London, and then we hired someone who went off to Manchester. To Taavet's point, the choice of Manchester, first of all, was fairly opportunistic. We found someone who was interested in Manchester before we found Birmingham or Leeds. There wasn't much more science than that. And we had these teams of 3 people in each of the cities. And that makes sense when you're in London, Manchester, and Birmingham. But once we started to get to 10 different cities, 20 different cities, even though they all had very different local sort of needs and regulations, we were able to start centralizing some of the processes in the team to run it more at a national level. And starting, first of all, with the marketing side, which I think in many of the businesses I've looked at is easier to centralize than some of the operational pieces. But we first of all managed to bring all of the marketing into London and do national campaigns. That doesn't mean that you don't do regional specific campaigns, but you have one single team that's learning from it. And then gradually over time also centralize the operational pieces as well. And again, keeping a team that had local nuance and built those relationships, but centralized together in London. And I think the adaptability and nimbleness of the organization is something that's also important for organizations that are scaling rapidly.
I think for us, maybe it's 2 conflicting stories. One is about US that I mentioned. Before launching US, we built an office. We moved maybe 5 people, hired 5 people locally in New York, and then established also an operations hub in Tampa. So relatively heavy-handed, but we kind of thought US has to be an important market, and it's been hard work, but it'll be our biggest market pretty soon now. On the other hand, Brazil was very opportunistic. We launched by working with a partner bank using their license, and it's been our most successful launch and growing crazy without any marketing. Even for the first 6 months, the team had never been to Brazil, but we had a fantastically growing market. So what to learn from it? Go figure.
It's hard to beat trying. What about, actually, I want to start broadening out the conversation for a bit. So maybe first of all, obviously globalization is one way to drive size, to leverage your investments, but the other is to diversify, right? You've already got existing markets, you've built customer relationships, and the classic thing in corporate strategy is you can figure out what are the things you can sell to them. Maybe start with Fred. I know for a long time you guys had been quite focused on global, but I think that's thinking shifting some. How have you approached diversification?
The way you approach it is, first of all, to know what are the closest activity in your ecosystem. And actually, in order to do that, you can simply scan all the partners we are interacting with on a daily basis. And then when you're interacting with some partners like very, very often, it means that they are important for your activity and they are important as well for your service and for your community, for the users. So for us, diversification, the first thing is that we realized the original idea was really long distance carpooling, which means average distances of 300 miles, where people share usually a price of 15 to 20 euros, something like that, per seat. So that's the price passengers will pay. But then we also see that on this activity, purely like sharing the space in cars which are empty. We are not on the sector of home to work carpooling. Because our service really resonates for trips around 300 kilometers, and it does not work for distances of, let's say, 10, 20, or 50 kilometers, or a lot less. So we decided to launch a product like this for specifically targeted to home-to-work carpooling, which is called BlaBlaLines. And then also we...
in your core French market originally.
Yeah, because it's the one we know better. That's where we have all the development teams as well. So it makes it easier to understand everything that is happening when including the developers understand what's happening on the field. Because when you decide, let's say you're in France and it's feasible, but you're in France, you have your entire tech team in France, and you decide to launch a new feature in Poland. Then you need additional translation from the Polish members to understand what exactly is not working and how you could fix it. So you spend more energy in getting the feedbacks than if you have everything in the same language as the developers. So we did launch this product a few months ago. We expanded to the Ile-de-France region, and it's growing nicely. We have lots of things to improve, of course. There's been like 60 improvements on the product since we launched. We also launched something which is interesting. It's we're partnering more and more with an insurance company. It's with AXA, because we know that all our drivers are insured, and it's also a concern. Even though insurance is included in carpooling, you don't need a special insurance to carpool because it's all covered by default. But still, people have issues about they ask if they're insured, and so it's kind of an insurance they want to have. So we've made a partnership to actually add some very specific insurance to the core activity. Let's say if you do carpooling and you forget your sweater or your computer in the car, then the driver has to send it back to you. Well, this is not covered by normal insurances. And so because you're not supposed, well, usually it's your you travel with your brother or with your friends, so there's no problem usually to get your stuff back. But here it's you travel with someone you may never see again, and so the driver will have to send it back to you. So this is a special insurance as well. If you want to drive, if you're the driver and you want your passengers to take the wheel at some point because it's a long ride, it's a 6-hour drive, and so you want to ask if one of the passengers can drive, then it is usually it's insured, but then the threshold, the franchise you'll have to pay to the insurance is higher if it's not you behind the wheel. So what we do with the insurance company is we buy back this additional cost so that it doesn't cost you more if something happens. So this kind of services, which are very specific to carpooling, we've developed with a partner, and so we think about expanding activities as well in this field.
There's a bit of a sequence. So for a while, you focused more on international expansion, and then you shifted and started filling in the product line. Would that be fair? A little bit of sequencing there? Or?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's always the same. When you drive, it's super hard to accelerate and to turn the wheel at the same time. I mean, it's a very good solution to actually get an accident. So accelerating is really expanding, and turning the wheel is diversifying. Doing both at the same time is dangerous. Yeah.
Joe, do you want to share a little bit? I mean, obviously, Uber had a lot of high-profile, R&D investments. Do you want to share a little bit about the conversations you had within Uber around this diversification versus expansion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the way I personally thought about it and talked about it with the team echoes a bit the car driving analogy, but I always thought of it as a pyramid, which is the top priority is that your core business model is working well, which means amazing customer support. They're having a great experience, and in our case, riders and drivers are happy, loving the experience. And you have to have that in place before you earn the right to grow that business, because otherwise you're scaling something that's a crap experience, full stop. So for me, it was very important to make sure that the growth didn't get so out of control that you actually lose that core rider and driver experience. Then there's a second piece about growing, and obviously most startups are hoping to be growing at the same time and always, so you grow your core business. Then you can think about if you want to expand into other markets. And again, I'd often have teams who wanted to immediately expand to a smaller city. But if their core market isn't growing and working well, then you just lose focus. And then finally, after you've expanded internationally, that's when I typically think about the diversification point. Obviously, competitive pressures, funding pressures, all of those things drive specific decisions in each individual case. But one of the challenges I certainly saw at Uber and in many of the startups I talked to is this desire to let every single flower grow. And everyone in the team is so entrepreneurial and everyone's got these amazing ideas that actually part of my challenge was to figure out which of the 3 or 4 things we're going to do and do well and go big, rather than all of us having our little projects here and there.
Really good. So Taavet, financial services has been famous for lots of elaborate cross-selling corporate strategies. How do you think about it within the TransferWise situation?
So I think, first of all, it's a big question in focus. You know, I think in the end of the day, you can only do a few things really well versus trying to do 12 different things and doing them really well. So in a way, we've been really fortunate that we have a humongous market. You know, we estimate it's between $5 and $10 trillion, which moves across country borders every year. So you know, we have a long way to go in the very core market. And in that sense, we've been busy focusing on making sure we're continuing to build our experience better, making it cheaper, faster, easier to use for consumers, and then slowly adding new segments. So we started out as a consumer service, then we realized it's a very same problem that businesses have. So we started working on small to medium businesses and scaling both of these geographically, which is still where majority of our growth will come for the next couple of years. But then in parallel, we saw, okay, now if we're thinking about use cases, we can see this kind of use case of international people having multiple bank accounts, and something we can do about it, which is we actually launched a new product called the borderless account. You know, still solving the same problem of international money, but you know, being a very new use case. And I think the last thing to think about, it's a question of your growth rate. You know, when you're still growing 100% year on year, you know, it'll most likely be stretching your team quite a bit already. And, you know, also it gives you a good excuse not to think about more things because you're probably doing something right and you can still double down on it. But at some point when you do start seeing your growth rate go down, that's also another incentive to think about it. But fundamentally it all boils down to people. You know, are you able to hire enough people? You know, can you move the people who built your core product onto building the secondary product? You know, without losing the quality of the first.
Actually, I just want to pick up on that last piece around the people. So it's come up from time to time in the conversation. Any quick advice, if you're going to boil down, what kind of people, besides INSEAD graduates, but what kind of people do you look for and what kind of capabilities when you look for people to grow these businesses and work internationally?
Well, for me, and you're right to mention because INSEAD brought a lot of colleagues. We are 5 INSEAD people at BlaBlaCar, and I see Julien and Chantal over there who are part of the story. And so the main thing I look for in interviews when I have people who will be working for my project is the stars that you see in the eyes or not. Do the people really want to do this thing? Because, you know, there's one saying which says will beat skills. If you take clever people who want to do things, they'll find a way. And then they'll learn the skills along the way. If you find excellent, skilled, expert people, but they are not very motivated for your project, and the way to feel that is subtle, because some people look for a position, they look for a title, they look for salaries, but they don't look for the success of your company. You should avoid those people at maximum, because they will be sitting here, but they will not be willing, like from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, to make your business a success.
So I'll add a few words while I hold the microphone. So we've found that what works well is people who really obsessed about customers and have a relatively small ego. People coming in asking for titles, etc. It's like typically a pretty bad sign versus someone coming in and talking really about how do we solve a customer problem, how do we make the product better and grow it. So being hands-on doer, even if you're a manager, still kind of knowing how to roll up your sleeves, how to get stuff done. How to get stuff done has been kind of super important, versus getting in people who come asking for how many people report to me and what's my title. That's probably a pretty bad starting position, and usually ends up badly for us.
And I learned a really important lesson actually in terms of hiring, which was don't hire for what you need now, but hire for what you're going to need in 12 to 18 months. And I think it's something many startups come across, which is you have this burning need now for someone to do something and you want to get that person in place as soon as possible. The problem is in many European markets, by the time you found the person, that could be at 3 months, they maybe don't start for another 3 months. Then they take a bit of time to get up to speed. By the time they've joined and are on board, your business is 2 or 3 times the size, and the nature of the challenge is very different. And I've seen situations where that works well, but I've also seen situations where I really wasn't looking forward enough to figure out what I'd need in the future. And then you also look for people who are going to be able to adapt and grow with the business. And so many of my team went from being individual contributors to having a small team to actually running a large team of 10, 15, 20 people, and figuring out who are those people who are going to be adaptable and self-aware enough to be able to do it.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing around this as well, is when your business is growing, opportunities inside the company will be growing, and you'll be the people of the team to be able to grow as well. If they can't grow with the business and they can't take a larger spectrum of things they do and they control, then you'll be stuck, and you'll have to recruit externally to staff above the earlier employees, and this is not as good as if your team is able to scale. So that's why I often said when we were recruiting and we were scaling like crazy, some people have when they recruit, they will say, oh, well, yeah, but this person seems overqualified. I'm like, nobody is overqualified. Nobody is overqualified for this position. It looks like a small position, but 6 months from now, it will be a very important position which will grow, and you want the person to be able to take the next role. And if you hire lower, then you'll get someone who can scale, so you need that. The other thing I do in interview, which I really love, but then the candidates don't see it, it's like I imagine myself being managed by this person. And I'm like, would I like to work for this person? Would I like this person to be my boss? If the answer is no, because you feel that it's not working, that it's a very good way to see how people who will be managed by this person will feel. And you're like, no, so it's not going to work. But if you're like, yeah, I could feel this person could be my boss, I would be super happy to bring results to this person. And then if you feel right about it, then it means it's a person who will be able to scale in the way you want your culture to evolve.
I'm going to shift the conversation again slightly. So each of you, I was surprised as I reflected on the panel, have actually shifted your roles in the last year. I think in both Taavet and Fred's example, you're still deeply involved with your companies, but have stepped back from as much of the daily operational stuff. And Jo, you've actually moved on from Uber. So I'm just, again, there's so much stuff happening out there. You guys start to have, I guess, maybe a little more time, what's exciting you now? What kind of roles, projects, both within your companies and beyond, are keeping you up at night or getting you up in the morning?
Well, there's never enough time. No, well, there's one thing, but I don't have the answer. You know, that's the kind of thing where you have a big problem and you don't have an answer. But it's, I guess many of you are feeling the same, but we see climate change as a huge issue, and we don't seem to be finding any good solution. And I think the main challenge will be to make capitalism cope with climate change, because they don't pursue the same. Well, the environment in which we are is not an environment where sky is the limit, you know. And so capitalism is always looking for ways to grow and grow more and grow more and grow more. The problem is that we are in an environment which is fenced, limited. It is not unlimited. So if we don't find a way that capitalism is able to cope with fences and the fact that we can't expand everything always, then we're just all building machines that go against what we all see as a big challenge.
I think there's definitely there's a period of reflection on capitalism happening. I think one of the big strands is around environment. Of course, there's some other strands as well, but I think there's a lot of people who are concerned about that. But again, I don't think anyone claims to have the answer. So Jo, you've shifted actually completely from being in an operating company to being in venture capital as an advisor. How are you finding that change?
It's been really interesting to me to see how it works on the other side of the fence. I mean, my role at Uber was very much sort of operational and wasn't involved in the fundraising side. And so I typically look at businesses as a manager and think, is it a good team? Could I grow this business? Is it interesting? So really interesting to see the other side of the fence and the type of discussions and deliberations that go on when you look to invest in a company. And as I mentioned, EQT Ventures are really looking for those founders and CEOs who have a global vision. They're not just looking to make a few million euros, they're looking to grow a global success story. And then it's just been so interesting and exciting to have visibility of so many different startups. And there's so many companies. I mean, I'm based in London, so I've seen more there, but so many startups across Europe doing really, really interesting things and having the chance to engage with the founders and CEOs and try to help with some of those challenges has been really interesting.
Are there particular sectors, technologies that you're particularly looking at these days?
I'm looking across the board, essentially. I mean, I think my experience is particularly relevant for companies that are about to scale rapidly or expand internationally and particularly marketplace businesses. But at this stage, I'm really just interested in learning as much as I can and getting exposure to as many different companies as possible.
Okay. So Taavet, I don't know, been involved with Skype and then TransferWise. Where do you think you'll be working over the next 4 or 5 years?
So I think fundamentally there's still so much change coming in the future if we think about whether it's climate change we have to kind of deal with one way or other, or if we look at technology being applied to areas where it hasn't been applied to yet, education, healthcare. So I think there's a lot more to do, but for me personally, I'm trying to slow down for a moment before picking up speed again. So the change that I made from going from CEO to chairman is really about staying involved with TransferWise, making sure we continue growing, and there's a lot more to be done. But then slowing down for a moment and then seeing what's the next things that I want to dedicate the next 10 years of my life to.
Yeah, one other thing, because climate change, I told you I have no solution, but it's the biggest thing that we should all be worried about. So if anyone has a good idea, then just raise your hand or think about it for tomorrow. But there's another thing which I'm working on, and it's a project I had launched 2 years ago. It's around recruiting. I'm passionate about recruiting because I think that good recruitings create the best companies. Bad recruiting just kills companies. And there's been a lot of efforts made into capital to be invested in startups. And if we look at the French ecosystem, it's evolved to from a place where it was hard to raise capital to a place where now capital is flowing, and we're really able to raise capital at all the stages of the company. But we forget that, or at least it's not been structured the same way, that capital is one of the 2 legs you need to grow your business. The other leg is human resources, and you need to be able to hire people. And there's no global program for being able to recruit efficiently the people you need when you grow your business. And so the project I had been launching two years ago, it was called initially, because it was kind of a joke, so the French people will understand, and the others, I apologize, but it's kind of a private joke. It was called Reviens Léon, because it was based on an ad in the 80s, which was Reviens Léon, j'ai les mêmes à la maison, which was for Panzani. And so it was to show that we have companies which are as good as American companies or any other international companies, and we have very, very good job offers to offer. And so it was a call to all the French people who may be working abroad, willing to possibly join a French company, expanding internationally with the right mindset. And so it's called Wonder Léon today. And so I really want to push that more. There are 20 companies in the field now. We've begun some international expansion. We were joined by Trivago as well from Germany. So we don't have only French companies now. We are expanding into some European companies to be able to display the very good jobs that we have in the tech sector, which have a global component, so like you'll be working for a global company, and which could be attractive, which are attractive to anyone anywhere on the planet who would be willing to relocate to Europe, because we have lots of opportunities.
Actually, one thing I should mention in terms of recruiting talent, there is something happening in Paris, and you do sense it's easier to get people. We saw this. We put up the ad for our program manager of the INSEAD LaunchPad, and we had to pull the ad because we had over 500 applications already. So some things are shifting. Actually, from you guys sit over in London. Do people? Is there a perspective that things are starting to move on the continent, in Paris? Is something you notice or not?
I think it's really amazing to see what's happening in France. You know, being in London and being in the middle of a disaster called Brexit. You know, it's in France. The sun is shining. You know, it's one of the few places which is positive today. I think Canada is the other one. In every other country, it seems to be things are going in the wrong way. You know, I hope it's temporary, but
I mean, even the Germans can't get a government. You know, it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, so you know, with that context, I think what's happening here with Macron is amazing. And Station F, I actually came here first time last week. Is really you know, we should I would love to see more of this happening on global scale, kind of seeing this kind of initiatives to celebrate entrepreneurship and give people a platform to build on. It's really great to see.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Taavet said, really excited to see what's happening in Paris. I believe French VCs raised more money than any other country in Europe last year, and France is #1 in terms of volume and #2 in terms of value on VC deals. So there's a lot of deals and investments being done, a lot of them early stage, but also some later stage funding as well. And then I think it's great to see things like Station F and the INSEAD partnership, because at EQT Ventures we believe that it's not just about that access to capital, but also an access to an ecosystem of experts and advisors who's done this before and been through it before. And so to see so much support and sort of great things happening like Station F is really encouraging.
I think what really excites us, again, for the INSEAD community is you start to see such a wealth of earlier stage startups, and there's going to be a real opportunity for various players to help them go international, and it's super exciting. Last reflections for the panelists, maybe just around different things. What do you think INSEAD can contribute on this topic of globalization? Are there things we should be studying? Just how do you think about INSEAD's greater engagement around entrepreneurship going forward? Any closing thoughts for us, Fred?
So yeah, there are some things we've said, and we all faced the difficulty of it, is what do you localize and what do you centralize? And I think it's applicable not only to marketing but also to financing, because sometimes you have to do some deals locally and not centrally. It's applicable to tech, it's applicable to business development and partnerships. And so I think this issue is crucial when you want to become global, because global doesn't mean anything. You'll have to adapt anyway to all the cultures and all the countries. So you have to find the right method, and some sort of best practices and advice on this could be.
If you look at the textbooks, I mean, they're still full of examples from, Unilever versus P&G, L'Oreal. So there's a lot of work that had been done on older form multinationals, but really to say for tech companies today, what do we know about global versus local, is a great, great topic. Jo?
Yeah, for me, I think it's about more of the things that we've talked about today. So having access within the current students and the alumni to an amazing source of talent, but also people who will have expertise and experiences from such a vast array of startups, bigger companies, a huge range of experience, and figuring out how do we do things like this to bring all of us access to that expertise when we need it.
And Taavet, last word.
So I think the most lasting value that INSEAD can leave is going to be about people and network, which will kind of stay with you for a long time. And it's both professors and the people you studied with, and the future people who will study. But when I think about the curriculum and how it can help, I think there's a couple of things. One is kind of sharing different perspectives and different stories. One of the things I've learned while building TransferWise is that there is no single right way. Different companies do things in radically different ways and succeed in very different ways. So, looking at one textbook, best way of doing globalization, probably not going to work for you. You have to see there are different ways of doing it. That's one, and the other one is teaching more about kind of entrepreneurial product development. How do you build an MVP and test things quickly? The INSEAD way for launching TransferWise would have been writing a 40-page business plan, spending 6 months raising seed capital, and then 18 months later we probably would have packed things up because we were just tired. Instead, we started working on it in P3 and launched 3 weeks after graduation. And what we launched was a very bare bones prototype, but that gave us the proof to keep on going.
I mean, what excites us is, again, to take the top talent that we have in the MBA program and expand it to some of the top startups with top VCs here who have that sort of agile, experimenting, fast learning approach to business. I think is going to really strengthen, hopefully, not only Station F, but the MBA program. Okay, folks, that is going to be out of time on our panel. Please join me in thanking them. And as we want to keep attracting top speakers to our speaker series, we're going to start a tradition of giving these lovely rocket lava lamps to our speakers. Your boxes are empty. We will actually ship yours to you, so you don't have to carry yours back. So there you go, that you get your first. Here we go, and here's a symbolic empty box. But poor Fred, who arrived from Russia with his suitcase, he actually gets a heavy actual lava lamp. So please, once more time, thank you for joining us. A big thank you for all of you for showing up, but also I've just got to really recognize a huge team in the community at INSEAD. When I said 4 months ago, nothing existed, no logo, no steering committee, no website, no panel, there was a huge effort. No startups to sit in our first opening this month. There was just a huge effort by so many people in the team to create this in just a matter of months. So I hesitate to thank everyone, but definitely Nancy, who spoke ease, has been just working her crazy hours to make this happen. All of the comms people, Julian back there, but Sophie and Julia and Dove, Axel, thank you so much. The steering committee, thank you for the meetings, the feedback on email. The people I'm forgetting, I'm really sorry, but you were awesome too. And please have some stuff. We'd love for your feedback. Thank you again for coming out. We're started. Cheers.